Good afternoon. We gather today as people who have loved Marilyn James very, very much, and whom we know loved us as well. And I thank you for the wonderful prelude. Denny, I look forward to hearing words of remembrance and really good music. Thank you for coming today. Thank you for honoring Marilyn's memory and for honoring Marilyn's family. Marilyn's been laid to rest. There was the interment service this afternoon. There were butterflies released and Gerber daisies, bright sun and a lovely breeze, absolutely ideal to be at the graveside and to say goodbye. And here in the sanctuary, we give thanks to God for Marilyn's faith, for her years and years of involvement and faithfulness in this congregation. I can picture her in the choir loft still. And I'll always call her Mrs. James, because even though she said, call me Marilyn, I went to high school with Carrie, and I just can't do that. But I must tell you that when David Peter Laws, who is 18 years old now, was born 18 and a half years ago at Kishwaukee Hospital, I called my parents, who happened to be in Florida for the first time ever, not being home, and my mom called Mrs. James, and Mrs. James got to the hospital within seconds, it seems. And she sat down and she held David in a rocker and she rocked with him and she told me, babies love me because of my bosom. Let's celebrate Marilyn James.
Well, thank you so much, Reverend Laws, AKA Kathy. On behalf of the James family, I would like to welcome you to the celebration of life of our mother, aunt, mother-in-law, grandmother, grandmother-in-law, great-aunt, great-grandmother, great-great-aunt, great-great-grandmother, and great-great-great-aunt, Marilyn Jane Shaw James. At the Elwood House at our father's celebration here in 2013, which many of you attended, Mama grabbed my arm and said to me, promise me that my show will be as good as Daddy's, if not better. Of course I said yes, and with your help, I know I can keep my word. We will celebrate her in song, accompanied by her friend, the wonderful Denny Vocal, in prayers, in her own words, and in our remembrances of her. Our celebration is divided into 5 major categories of her life, one more than Daddy's, so we are off to a flying start. Faith, education, friendship, the theater, and family. First, we are going to sing together. All the music for today's celebration is found in the back of your bulletin. Music Alone Shall Live is sung a cappella in a round. It was near and dear to Mama's heart and the heart of every Girl Scout and every Girl Scout leader here today. So let's sing it through all together once, and then we're going to divide up. So we're all going to sing it together, and then this group is going to start, and then this group is going to come in, okay? I see the Girl Scouts nodding. I'm really excited. All things shall perish from under the sky. Music alone shall live. Music alone shall live. Music alone shall live, never to die. So this group, we start first. All things shall perish from under the sky. Keep going. All things shall perish from under the sky. I thought that was absolutely fabulous. Yes, you should give yourselves a big round of applause. Yes. Today's scripture readings are read by Mama's oldest grandchild, granddaughter Amy, her 3 children, great-grandchildren Katie, Peyton, and Jacob. Katie is the mother of Mama's great-great-grandchildren, Marilyn and Nora. The first is Matthew 5:4, a beatitude that embraces us all today. Next comes Ecclesiastes 3:1-8, which reminds us of the turn, turn, turn of life. And finally, we will hear Matthew 11:28-30. Our mother was so weary and burdened with pain at the end of her life. As we listen to the words of this passage, let us know that no matter what each of us believes individually in this room about the afterlife, she is in a better place now than she was for far too long.
Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted.
A time for everything. There is a time for everything, and a season for every activity under the heavens. A time to be born and a time to die. A time to plant and a time to uproot. A time to kill and a time to heal. A time to tear down and a time to build. A time to weep and a time to laugh. A time to mourn and a time to dance.
A time to scatter stones and a time to gather them. A time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing. A time to search and a time to give up. A time to keep and a time to throw away. A time to tear and a time to mend. A time to be silent and a time to speak. A time to love and a time to hate. A time for war and a time for peace.
Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy, and your burden is light.
Mama always wondered who would sing Amazing Grace at her funeral. And then when you all sang it so beautifully in such a joyous and upbeat way at Daddy's celebration here, she said that was just perfect. So at the risk of tempting perfection, let's do it with even more of the happiness that comes from the spiritual freedom promised in this abolitionist anthem.
Let us come to God in prayer. Holy God, your ways are not our ways, your thoughts are not our thoughts. Yet we are emboldened to ask you that your Holy Spirit may intercede for us with sighs too deep for human words. Heal our wounded hearts, and through the veil of tears and the silence of emptiness, assure us again of your presence and your love. Lean close to us, God, and hear us now as we offer the prayers of our hearts, the words that remain unspoken but heard by you. O God, you are our strength and our Redeemer. You are the giver of life and the conqueror of death. And we praise you with humble hearts. With faith in your great mercy and wisdom, we entrust Marilyn, Jane, Shaw, James to your eternal care. We praise you for your steadfast love for her all the days of her earthly life. We thank you for all that she was to those who loved her and for her faithfulness to the Church of Jesus Christ. We thank you that for Marilyn, all sickness and sorrow, all pain has ended, death itself is past, and that she has entered the house where all your people gather in peace. Lord, keep us all in communion with your faithful people in every time and place, that at the last we may rejoice together in the heavenly family where Jesus Christ reigns with you and the Holy Spirit, one God forever and ever. And it is in Jesus' name that we pray together the words he taught us, saying, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen.
This hymn was sung at our Father's celebration, and my mother loved this rendition of it by grandson Nathan Blumenfeld James so much that his Aunt Carolyn James requested he do an encore for today. Nathan?
I was there to hear your morning cry. I'll be there when you are old. I rejoice the day you were baptized to see your life unfold. I was there when you were but a child, with fate to suit you well. In a blaze of light you wandered off, find where demons dwell. When you heard the wonder of the word, I was there to cheer you on. You were raised to praise the living Lord, to whom you now belong. If you find someone to share your time and join your hearts as one, I'll be there to make your verses rhyme from dusk till rising sun. And in the middle ages of your life. Not too old, no longer young. I'll be there to guide you through the night, complete what I've begun. And when the evening gently closes in and you shut your weary eyes, I'll be there as I have always been, with just one more surprise. I was there to hear your morning cry. I'll be there when you are old. I rejoice the day you were baptized, to see your life unfold.
Mama loved this church. Whenever she said home, we know she meant DeKalb. And whenever she said our church, we know she meant the First Congregational Church of DeKalb, Illinois. She might have loved Daddy enough to come and live near us when he insisted. She might have found a wonderful and welcoming local church home with Seaside Community Church in Torrance, California. But nothing ever replaced this church and church community in her heart. We asked Tim Placan to talk about her relationship to First Congregational. But before he speaks, as he comes up, this is the pillow that the choir signed when my parents left in October of 2003 for California. It was always in a place of honor in each of the 3 places she lived. It was one of her special pillows that was with her when she died. And now, it's come home to you. Oh, go.
You know, I'll put it up here at her place in the corner wall.
Oh, wow, that's so cool.
This was her seat right here.
Yes, that's awesome. Thank you.
You know, life teaches us little lessons when we least expect them. The one I'm learning now is that if you put your notes in your phone, make sure it's in a font you can read when your phone is. So well, that's the way it goes sometimes. In December of 1952, Harry Truman was President of the United States, and the #1 song in the country was I Saw Mommy Kissing Santa Claus. And more relative to why we're here, on December 4th, 1952, a young couple with their 8-month-old daughter joined the DeKalb Congregational Church. It wasn't the United Church of Christ yet. That merger came in 1957, and it wasn't this building, although ground had been broken. And I'm reasonably sure that on Sunday, July the 4th, 1954, Marilyn and Nelson were in the group that walked from the old stone church down on 2nd and Grove to this new building for the first service held here. And where Marilyn probably walked right up, staked out her seat at the front of the soprano section, where she would remain for the next 51 years. It was my great pleasure to be the choir director for the last 13 of those 51 years, and it was an experience that was made very delightful for me because it allowed me on Wednesday evenings and Sunday mornings to be in close proximity to the gracious and wise lady whom we're here to remember. And I should add witty as well. Because on the occasional Sunday when we were about to attempt a particularly challenging anthem, Marilyn would turn in her seat and address the rest of the sopranos and say, "Okay, ladies, gird your loins." There would then be a brief pause while the choir director waited for the choir to regain its equilibrium. And then we would assail the anthem and make it our own. Yes, Marilyn loved this church. She was committed to it, and I think that's manifest in a sentence that I heard both her and Nelson say many times. They said, "I have never said no to my church. I have never said no to my church." Keeping that in mind, we can be pretty sure that there was not a board or a committee or an office or a potluck supper or an unwashed dish or an offending anthem that did not benefit from Marilyn's ministrations. And because of that, she helped make this congregation more than a congregation, but a community. Several years ago, this church adopted as its mission statement that we would I can't remember it. I wrote it down. That we would embody God's love for all by living an active faith in service to others. I could have started with that and saved a lot of time, because that was certainly Marilyn. Janice and I are very, very happy to have known her, and are very grateful to have known her, and we remember her, as do most of the other folks who remember her, very, very fondly. Thank you.
Mama believed that there was nothing more important than education, her own and that of everyone else, especially women. Until the end of her life, she was encouraging to anyone seeking higher education, including cheering for granddaughter Jessica Lance on Facebook every time she had a triumph in her current pursuit of a degree. Let's start this segment of our celebration with the alma mater for Mama's beloved undergrad school, Carthage College. I am persuaded that we shall only sing one verse by my husband and Denny, so we shall only sing one verse. She regarded Carthage as a mythic place. You got on a train in war-torn Chicago and ended up in the rolling country hills of a peaceful paradise. The tune isn't terribly challenging for anyone who has ever seen the movie Animal House. And let's sing it like she always did, with the lively vigor of the Carthage College cheerleader that she was. Denny? Good call, good call. In June of 1939, Mama and her best friend, Daddy's cousin Marilyn Harding, edited their 8th grade graduation journal. Oh, and I have it here. Of the two Mimis, as the two Marilyns called themselves, clearly one of them was a very funny writer. It is not hard for those of us who knew her to hear the sparkle of Mama's dry wit, even at such a tender age, forever preserved in this publication. Grandson Jordan Blumenfeld James, one of her favorite educated people, will read some excerpts from the Jameson Journal, which we are all pretty sure Marilyn is all Marilyn all the time. Jordan?
Animal House, but that was Dirty Dancing. Okay, anyway, this is from the Jameson Journal, 8th grade graduation journal of Minnie Mars Junction School, edited by Marilyn James Shaw and Marilyn Harding. If this Jameson Journal of June 1939 shall bring the boys and girls of Jameson a vision of their grammar school days as one brief yesterday, that will not fade. We, the staff, will feel our efforts have been more than well rewarded. From Flower Girls and Healthy Boys, pages 18 and 19. What would happen if? I'm butchering some of these last names, so if anyone knows them, I apologize. The Lahart twins lost their resemblance. Richard Zeuer gave us a ride in his yacht. Peter Demos couldn't draw. Roy Roller couldn't tumble. Alan Mattery remembered to bring his books to class. Mary Ann Ackerman grew quiet. Fred Brazick stopped apologizing. Wilbert Erickson had new gym shoes. Carl hated agriculture. Evelyn's hair turned black. Betty played a different march. Jay grew sad and gloomy. Ruth grew tall. Betty Long lost Josephine. Maxine liked the city life. June Vitt didn't look after Jack. Corinne became a shadow overnight. Marilyn Shaw and Hardings forgot their lessons. We received our high school diplomas by mistake.
Here to speak about Marilyn and education is friend and fellow educator, Beth Campen, one of our favorite teachers at DeKalb High School, DeKalb Senior High School. Lois is going to correct me if I say that wrong.
Well, I think I'd been in DeKalb for a while before I actually met Marilyn. And I first met her in the faculty dining room at DeKalb High School because at that time she had not started subbing for my classes yet. And I was always enjoyed talking because she was happy, I like the word joyful, because you can be joyful even when things aren't going well. And I think that says a lot about someone. So I'm going to do a quote from Frederick Buechner, and I have to put my glasses down because I've got to get them changed. But anyway, so as I start this, and then I have two stories to tell, and then I have just nothing to elaborate on, but just something I want to say at the end. Frederick Buechner, in his novel Brendan, and I don't know if any of you've read it, he has a line at the end. At one point I was going to tell you the whole ending, but that's not going to happen. I'm going to try to stay within the 2-minute thing. And but anyway, an incident happens, and what the main character in the story says is, he says, to lend a hand to each other when someone is falling is perhaps the only work that matters in the end. And the reason I thought of that is as I'm going to tell this first story about Marilyn, and the second one will be about Marilyn and Nelson together, is that we usually think of helping people, maybe keeping somebody from falling, as we step in when we see somebody falling, or we step in and, or somebody jumps into the water, and saves somebody. We think of that. But the fact is, doing a job and doing it well, doing it with generosity and good humor, that ends out keeping people from falling. So my first story is, and some of you know me and some of you don't, but around 1976 or 77, I think Marilyn began sometimes subbing in my class, and it really ended up being my classes. And I always considered myself a hard person to sub for because I had this mammoth vision about getting people to read, which they really did do, and they really began to do a lot of writing, but it meant a lot of work. And I knew some of the subs didn't like it, but Marilyn ended out getting used to it and liking it. But beginning in 77, when my husband had his first battle with bipolar illness, my life changed significantly. And I was out of school more as I was having to deal with things, and so Marilyn became a regular figure, as did Sally Vallette. And, but it ended up being Marilyn a lot more than Sally. So 1980 came, and I I was pregnant with my third baby. And he was due, according to the doctors, he was due around the middle of May, okay? So arrangements were made with Marilyn that she would take, the last 2 or 3, in fact, they set it up so that if he came in early May, then she would be taking the last 2 or 3 weeks of school. Instead, he arrived on the 8th of April. So clearly, the doctors had made some kind of mistake. Plus, my husband was not in good shape at all. And so the story I'm telling is that Marilyn took my place 7 weeks with no notice beforehand, and I had nothing to do with that first part because I was in the hospital, so it was the school making the arrangements with her. And as I shared with Kathy, one of the things, the thing I will say about that time was I was able to have peace. I happen to love teaching. I happen to love teenagers, even the ones that caused a lot of problems. And Facebook has been fun that way, reconnecting with even some of the ones who created problems who ask me if I remember them. And so when you love your family and you love your classroom, it is so important to have somebody who loves them too and isn't going to get overly frustrated. We all get frustrated at times. And because it was Marilyn, I then could focus on my family and what was going on in my family. And so that is the thing that when you talk about keeping people from falling, she knew some of the things that were going on, but it wasn't that she saved the day on one particular day, but she set a tone to things so that I could function. And I know we had great fun. I think twice I brought the baby in, to every class. He got passed around, and it was great fun. The second story is that 21 years later, that baby was the driving force behind our a group of young people putting on Twelfth Night at the Sandwich Opera House. And there were some people had already gotten out of college, some had not. And this was from both Wheaton and NIU. There were students from both of those, both ones who had graduated and ones who were still in school. On top of that, I had been invited to teach at the vocational school in Sandwich. And those of you who know me, yes, I got a reading program started there. Because these were kids who were taken out of the school regularly, and they weren't getting literature, and they got it because, well, I am who I am. I was hired to teach the writing and so forth, but that was there. And I also, at the same time, got invited to teach, both of them were part-time jobs at the Christian high school. So this is in Sycamore. So this was a really interesting mixture because there were a whole bunch of teenagers involved in this too. We involved them all. And I don't know whether it was the second or third performance, but who should show up but Marilyn and Nelson, all wreathed in smiles, at the end of the show, and different students talked to them, and of course the ones from Northern already knew them. And what I remember was an incredible amount of encouragement, which we all know is incredibly important in teaching, in life, is to do that. And so those are the two big memories I have of things that literally stand out to me was my maternity leave, which ended up being the end of my leaving. Not that wasn't the school district, it was decisions I had to make about my family that led to that. And then this other. And what I want to say here is, well, I said it already earlier, that I don't think we give enough credit to people for doing a job and doing it well with no fanfare, no, we're going to make you the top sub of the, give special awards and so forth and so on. And we don't value that enough in our day-to-day life. Now, maybe all of you do, but I know I've really worked on that in my life a great deal. What I want to say at the end is that there have been verses quoted here, so I want to quote one. It is required in a man that he, and I know it applies to women too, that he, she be found faithful. And that is something that was really true of Marilyn. Thank you.
Our mother loved and valued her friendships. Some were lifelong, others started here in DeKalb, and finally there were more friends and great times to be had with them in California. So let's start this section with one of her favorite Girl Scout rounds, Make New Friends. First we'll sing it all together, and then we'll split in half like before. And we can be enthusiastic and imperfect and just have a blast, okay? All together. Make new friends and keep the old. One is silver and the other gold. Make new friends and keep the old. Make new friends and keep the old. One is silver and the other gold. One is silver and the other gold. Gorgeous, gorgeous. Mama had close relationships with a group of women she called her DeKalb daughters. There are a number of them here today, including Reverend Kathy Laws, who is our officiant. First, her DeKalb daughter, even though she lives in Chicago, Lois Kergier Hobart, will read a poem entitled A Friendship Prayer. It comes from a little devotional book that came with Mama from DeKalb to Torrance to Culver City. She insisted it be next to her bed when she died. It is entitled The Treasure of a Friend by John C. Maxwell and was given to her by the Women's Fellowship of this church in October of 2003 as a farewell gift. She marked many pages as special with KCH Ice Cream Social sticky notes. A friendship prayer, of course, is one of them.
I'm honored to read this for my friend Marilyn, who I also called my other mother. Dear Lord, thank you for a special gift, one that cannot be bought for any amount of money. Thank you for a gift wrapped in beauty that is wonderful in all seasons and times. Thank you for a gift that is always near in times of need and brings great joy. Thank you for the gift that sparkles with freshness every day. Thank you for my friend. May I never take this gift for granted.
DeKalb daughters Cheryl Johnson, Andy Larson, and Nora Reeves will now remember Mama as their friend. And as these ladies come forward, I'm going to give this book to the DeKalb daughter Kathy Laws, because I'd like it to be home. I'd like it to be home at First Congregational.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
I get shorter as time goes on, or the mic just got too high. I'm glad she referred to us as the DeKalb daughters, because Marilyn was my other mother also. Of course, the James name goes way back for me because I walked on the ship in majority of one when I was 16 years old. And Nelson made me a star. I didn't have a line, but boy, I was a star. And then it was all his fault that years later, I played Betsy Nielsen in Letitia Westgate, his own play, and played my great-grandmother, Bertha Glidden Bront, in Good Roads Day. And then, of course, played the insipid Myrtle in Mornings at 7. But the high point of the James name for me is 212 Tilton Park Drive. not a lavish, rambling, pretentious home, but a sweet little cottage up on the hill on Tilton Park Drive, and that was Marilyn and Nelson was that house. And I lucked out to be the cleaning lady in about 1988, and I stayed with them and helped them pack up to go to California. The cleaning lady always gets to know the nitty-gritty about people. And in the background, I can hear that Issue song, "Stand by your man." Boy, she stood by her man. Did she ever? Heard Nelson. And while Nelson was rather mysterious and very quiet, Marilyn was as down to earth as anybody could possibly be. She and I could chat about anything under the sun, and we did. And she was fun. She was fabulous. She was a very good cook. She could cook just anything, bake anything. She'd take food to anybody who's struggling or not struggling. She sewed beautifully. She knitted beautifully. One of my favorite stories is when I went there one afternoon and she said, "I think I'd like to get the dining room windows washed and get those blue curtains, or washed, the darling blue cafe curtains." And they were such a lovely shade of blue and wonderful, and especially when the windows were clean and the curtains were clean. So that was the task. We got new windows, had new windows so that you could wash them inside and out without having to go outside. So I greeted the task with enthusiasm, and Marilyn washed curtains. And we got the curtains back up, and she said, "Oh, well, I feel so good about that." She said, "You know, I don't know if Nelson ever notices things like this, but I just think they look wonderful." And in about 10 minutes, I'm out working out in the kitchen, and she said, Come in here. And she motions me into the dining room. She says, "You see what I mean?" And she motions, and some little boy got his chocolate hands on the clean blue curtains. And there was only one other person in the house, and that was Nelson. And I thought, you know, if that was my husband, I would have torn him a new rear, I tell you. But oh no. That you see what I mean, she says. If you're at James's and it happens to be dinner time, they don't ask you if you'd like to stay, they just set another place. And they had this nice long table in the dining room. Well, Cheryl gets to stay and have dinner with them. So Marilyn's there, and E. Nelson is there, and Cheryl's right across. And this little trio, and of course here's the rest of the table. And Marilyn sets the table, and she casseroles. She always had wonderful casseroles. And oh, it was just wonderful, and always just a special treat. So anyway, we're sitting down, and we dish up, and Nelson says a little prayer. Oh, quiet, Nelson prayer. And then the cat jumps up on the end of the table. James has always had either one cat, sometimes two. And she walks the whole length of the table. And she goes around the casserole dish. And she puts her front feet on Nelson's plate. And Nelson looks down and he says, "Oh, look at you. Now you know better than that." And Marilyn looks out from behind her corn on the cob, and she says, "No, she doesn't." Now, I've never been fond of cats, But you know, in that moment, it wasn't bad because I was having dinner with Marilyn and Nelson James, and I felt like I was really honored. My friend Marilyn dressed very nicely. She was always heavy, but she dressed beautifully. She had good taste. She had nice jewelry. She always kept her hair done. She always wore a little makeup, and she had just a lovely smile. I loved her smile. And she would go out, and if you'd see her at the church or at the theater or anywhere, she looked like royalty. She just carried herself in a mode of royalty. So today is a wonderful day to think that Marilyn and E. Nelson James are back together side by side on their way to holy eternity together. I just thought of something. I bet you they get a cat.
I don't know exactly when I met Marilyn, but I was in community theater with her, and we were sitting in the green room, and we were talking about some people that had joined Stagecoach, and she says, oh, they're newbies. They're newbies. And I said, oh, that's really an interesting way to describe them. Am I a newbie? She said, how long have you been in Stagecoach? I said, 7 years. She said, yes. And then one of the times she came back, we were going to go take a ride up to Richmond to put flowers on the graves of her relatives. But first she had a big lunch at the hillside. But she gave me very specific instructions about when I was supposed to pick her up. So I went, nobody was coming out, so I stuck my head in. There was like 30 women at this table. So I walked in and I said, Marilyn James, your car service is here. And they all looked at her and said, Marilyn, you have a chauffeur? And very calmly she went, yes, yes I do. And then during rehearsals for performance for Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, my niece was pregnant with her first child, so I thought, oh great, I'll make a baby blanket. And I brought it to performance and sat in the dressing room downstairs, and I'm knitting away, and I'm thinking, this is fantastic. I really like it. And then I heard Marilyn was a knitter, so I showed it to her. She looked at it, and she said, Andy, it was this big. Next time you might want to make it a little bigger. If this woman had ever called me at any time, day or night, and said, Andy, I have to jump out off the Brooklyn Bridge, and I would have said, let's go.
So, moving along. So, the theater. Now I'm down here again. Our mother always said that our father taught her to love the theater, and she did. Especially musicals at the Stagecoach Players. Let us sing one of her favorites together from a show I had the privilege to watch them in at Stagecoach to usher in this section. You'll Never Walk Alone from Carousel.
It's
So beautiful, huh? A Little Night Music. My mother's favorite role at Stagecoach was Madame Armfeldt in A Little Night Music. I was lucky enough to be able to see her play this amazing character, and she was absolutely brilliant. And anybody who saw that performance can attest to that. Her solo, Liaisons, was a little tricky. And the night I saw it, she lost the orchestra in the middle, but then was right again. A big sigh of relief by me. She was fine, of course. At the party after the show, the director asked her politely, "Marilyn, how do you think your solo went tonight?" She answered brightly, "We started out together, then we went our separate ways, and then came back together in the end. Pretty much the same way it has gone for every single performance, and will probably go for the run of the show, so you might as well stop asking me." She then turned to me and rolled her eyes like the diva I never knew she was. I have asked my favorite scene partner, Alan Blumenfeld, to help me read a scene from the very beginning of the show. Imagine how magnificent she was playing this character who was so unlike her. Yes, Madame Armfeldt is in her wheelchair playing solitaire. She is watched by her 13-year-old granddaughter, Frederica.
If you cheated a little, it would come out.
Solitaire is the only thing in life that demands absolute honesty. As a woman who has numbered kings among her lovers, I think my word could be taken on that point. What was I talking about?
You said I should watch.
Watch what?
It sounds very unlikely to me, but you said I should watch for the night to smile.
Everything is unlikely, dear, so don't let that deter you. Of course, the summer night smiles 3 times.
But how does it smile?
Good heavens, what sort of a nanny did you have?
None, really, except Mother and the other actresses in the company, and the stage manager.
Stage managers aren't nannies. They don't have the talent.
But if it happens, how does it happen?
You get a feeling. Suddenly the jasmine starts to smell stronger, then a frog croaks, and then all the stars in Orion wink. Don't squeeze your bosoms against the chair, dear. It'll stunt their growth. And then where would you be?
But why does it smile, Grandmother?
At the follies of human beings, of course. The first smile smiles at the young, who know nothing. The second at the fools, who know too little, like Desiree.
Mother isn't a fool.
Mm-hmm. And the third at the old, who know too much, like me.
Grandmother, might it really smile tonight?
Why not? Now, practice your piano, dear, preferably with the soft pedal down. And as a treat tonight at dinner, I shall tell you amusing stories about my liaison with the Baron de Signac, who was, to put it mildly, peculiar. We've asked Kathy and Bob Kane, Stagecoach stalwarts and great friends of our mother's, to speak about her relationship to Stagecoach. But before they get started, here are their Stagecoacher of the Year awards. Our father's from 1972 and our mother's from 1990. They were so proud of these special honors, and my mother always had them prominently displayed wherever she lived, and it's only right that they too have come home to Stagecoach, where they belong.
Marilyn James. I love that lady the day we met at Stagecoach 50 years ago. Now, when I say lady, I mean lady in every sense of the word, because that she was. Oh, I'm sure she had her moments, but in the big picture, she was definitely a lady. Now, James is kind of synonymous. Did I say that right? With Stagecoach. It's difficult to talk of Marilyn in conjunction with Stagecoach without mentioning Nelson, because they were a pair. Oh boy, they were a pair. Some of you were here and remember the old tin building on Barbara Green Road. Well, this pair was a driving force in the growth of our little theater. And I was happy that they were still here to see their dream coming to fruition. And they were here to see and to help us move in to the building we now have before moving off to California to be with family. This is to keep me on track. Where am I? Breathing is difficult, I'm sorry. I worked with this pair on more shows than I can remember, and never had a bad experience. But if there was one, I'd remember that. Where am I?
Kind of whenever Nelson would get upset.
Oh, yeah, Marilyn was the calm, collected one. Whenever Nelson would get upset with someone or something, she had a way of calming him down and getting everything back on track. She had a great sense of humor and a dry wit that would put some comedians to shame. Now, there were times with a group sitting around in the green room of the old theater, chatting, and Marilyn would come up with one of her witty lines and then sit there with that deadpan expression while everyone else is laughing. Is this it? Yeah, she loved theater, mostly as a spectator, I think. Although she enjoyed doing costumes, props, anything to help Nelson with his productions. He even got her on stage, acting. And she was very good. There was no surprise. Where am I? Lost. Oh, I didn't get there yet. Oh, well. I'm old. There's a Marilyn quote that hangs in my memory. I don't remember where or when. Well, I can still hear her in my mind saying, Nelson says he loves me every day, but I think he loves Stagecoach more. Where are we?
We're almost done. This is the last page.
This is it.
Yep.
Okay. Whenever I think of her, I can't help but smile. She was a beautiful person and a great friend, and she will be missed by many for years to come. But now this pair is back together. Oh, what a wonderful reunion that must have been. Thank you.
In 1958, and in those early years, her job was to keep the children quiet while he held rehearsals in the basement. And eventually, as often happens with spouses, she became more involved in the production, doing props for such shows as Arsenic and Old Lace in 1971, followed by I Never Sang for My Father, The Price, Love in E-Flat, Lo and Behold, Squabbles, The Prisoner of Second Avenue, and Witness for the Prosecution. She always said her favorite job was doing costumes, which she did for such shows as Brigadoon, Death Trap, Gypsy, The Wizard of Oz, The Miracle Worker, Arsenic and Old Lace, Look Homeward Angel, Mornings at 7, Paris is Out, The Dining Room, and she stage managed 5 of Nelson's shows, including Crimes of the Heart, Plaza Suite, Steel Magnolias, The Philadelphia Story, and The Show Up. Are you surprised at how many shows there were? I was. Marilyn finally appeared on stage in such shows as Carousel, Cabaret, Brigadoon, Mornings at 7. She served 3 terms as corresponding secretary and received a special award in 1977. By the way, she didn't want to go to the banquet that year, and she was really mad at Nelson for making her go because he knew she was getting an award. Marilyn might have been small in stature, but she was a force to reckon with. She was sweet and kind, but never underestimate her backbone. She taught me a lot in the years that I knew her. She taught me about African violets. Remember, she said, they're from Africa. They like it warm and dry. Don't overwater them. And she gave me her own special plant food for my African violets. And she taught me to really like the violets. She also taught me that if you tuck your blouse into your pantyhose, they won't see the line on stage. I directed Carousel, and one of my best castings, in my opinion, was to cast Nelson as the Starkeeper and Marilyn as the Starkeeper's friend. And my favorite photo, one most of you have probably never seen, but it was in the green room of the old theater with Marilyn sitting in a chair while Nelson was kneeling on the floor putting on her shoes. I'm so glad I had the privilege of knowing her, and she will be missed.
So beautiful. Some enchanted evening, my father always said he fell in love with my mother when they danced together as the maid of honor and best man at Aunt Marilyn and Uncle Fred's wedding. That first song they danced to became their song, Some Enchanted Evening from South Pacific. Somehow, somewhere, I believe they are forever young and dancing to it right now. I've asked Nathan to sing it for us this afternoon, and he's made a really cool arrangement. Thank you, Nathan.
Some enchanted evening, you may see a stranger, and you may see a stranger across a crowded room. Somehow you'll know even then. Somewhere you'll see her again and again. Some enchanted evening, someone may be laughing, you may hear her laughing across a crowded room. And night after night, as strange as it seems, the sound of her laughter will sing in your dream. And who can explain it? Who can tell you why? Fools give you reason, wise men never try. Some enchanted evening, when you find your true love, when you hear her call you across a crowded room, and fly to her side and make her your own. And all through your life you may dream all alone. So once you have found her, never let her go. Once you have found her, never let her go. Some enchanted evening.
was really lucky. I remember in elementary school when we had, winter breaks, all my friends would say, oh, I have to go to New York, oh, I have to go to Florida to visit my grandparents. And I was like, well, I only have to drive not very far. My grandma's right there. My grandma would come to me. But I was even luckier to have a grandmother like mine. She always took an interest in what I was doing. Always. I remember, I really like this book called The Hunger Games, and she took me to see the movie, and I remember sitting next to her, and I remember this really graphic, horrible scene, and I just remember hearing it, oh my God. And I remember thinking, oh my God, I can't believe my grandma took me to see this movie. I can't believe I didn't think about this. But because I wanted to go, she wanted to go. And she wanted to take me. And I remember in high school, all my friends started doing water polo, and I was a swimmer. And I decided, I'll do it, I'll try it. And I think going in, neither of us really knew anything about it. But she went to every single home game. She went to every single playoff game, because it was important to me. And I think by the end, she knew more than I did. Because she just cared so much about it, because I cared about it. And I just love her so much.
Okay. Next is our cousin and Mama's goddaughter, Ruth, who speaks for all of Mama's sister Phyllis's family, the Carlsons. She adored every Carlson in this room. And thank you so much to my beautiful cousin to represent the Carlsons today.
The Carlson affiliation goes back 95 years because Phyllis was Marilyn's older sister. And I'm sure she was delighted as a child to welcome Marilyn James to the family. Except that it was Marilyn Shaw. And Marilyn Shaw and Phyllis Shaw grew up almost inseparable, except at the end of dinner. When dishes needs to be done, Marilyn was stuck with dishes because my mother was much smarter. She would hide in the bathroom. They spent their summers at their beloved cottage in Lake Geneva, where Catherine and I got to spend lots of time with Grandma, later in life. But the best part was Marilyn gave everything to everyone, just as you and communities all knew she did that for family too. Every one of us not only has the spirit of Marilyn in her heart, but has something in her home that Marilyn made. My granddaughter today wore my mother's wedding dress that Marilyn painstakingly made, stitch by stitch, from fabric, from Gossard and Company, where her father was a designer. Her daughter, my great-granddaughter, said in January, New Year's Eve actually, her goal was to learn to sew. She will be 7 later this month. And earlier today, she had on a nice frock that she made. But she saw the cemetery had black on, so she wanted to wear black. So now she has black on. Marilyn had 3 nephews, 3 great-nephews, 5 great-great-nephews, and 1 great-great-great-nephew, but she wanted not to have to call that extra great. That's what she told me. She had me as a niece, 4 great-nieces, 6 great-great-nieces, and 1 great-great-great-niece. My oldest brother preceded her in death, but he would say, we were avid Cub fans. And all 3 of my brothers, because 2 of them gave me feedback, would have said that we always liked holidays at Maryland's. They don't remember the early years. We always went to Shaw's. But when Shaw's no longer hosted holidays, we went to Maryland's, and they remembered the food. That was the first thing they told me. Mention the food. Also, David and my brother Peter shared the month of April as birthdays, which is the crown jewels as you celebrate somewhere around the first week of April, the April birthdays in the family, and March birthdays, because we have several here in the front row. We also, my oldest brother and my youngest brother were April. My granddaughter shares Catherine's birthday. Many of them, my second daughter has a March birthday. So we have lots in common for birthdays too. My brother Paul said that he remembered the most, and the most amazing part of Marilyn was that at 87 years old, well, I should back up a minute, my brother fell in love for the third time. And he saw Marilyn, and he had, you know, she could tell. She called me on the phone. You know your brother's in love. And I said, well, yeah. Your brother's getting married, which she also did to his daughter, who he hadn't told yet. Because Marilyn sometimes couldn't keep a secret. But he was so amazed that at 87, with Catherine's help, she flew to Atlanta, Georgia, and we all rented, because I met them there at the airport. We drove up to Franklin, North Carolina, and we attended Paul's wedding. And it was a fabulous affair. Peter shared with me that his favorite thing, besides food, was he remembered the holiday that he got his Polaroid camera, and he climbed the stairs at Tilton Park and took pictures, his first pictures of the family at Christmas. He regrets he no longer has that picture. But that started his love of photography, and anybody knows my brother knows he takes fabulous pictures. Paul said he remembered that when he was in the Peace Corps, a book arrived on stars. Of course, he would have been in the mountains in Peru? Colombia, was it? Peace Corps was Colombia. And it just showed up for Marilyn. It was a book, but Marilyn was big on books because she would send books to my mother long past the time she was aware that she could read words on a page, but she would hold them in her lap in the wheelchair. Everybody, as I said, has something in their home. My brother Paul has a blanket that the cat adopted, and the blanket's name is Marilyn. So when you go to Paul's house, the spirit of Marilyn, the name of Marilyn, is spoken on a regular basis. My brother Peter and I were in LA at Christmas time together a few years ago. It was actually the day that Wolf was born. Peter and I went with Marilyn out to one of her favorite spots on the ocean to watch where the whales come. And Peter and I went for a walk, and when we came back, Marilyn was sitting in a wheelchair with great news. We had a new grandson. Great-grandson. She was so delighted that baby Wolf had arrived, and we were so happy that we were able to be with her that day. When my nephew Walter moved to LA, he was embraced by the James clan. So he wasn't there by himself. He can't be with us because he's now living overseas. I once was able to con Persephone into allowing me to talk to Athena as a baby, not because I was Catherine's cousin, but because I was Walter's aunt. But more importantly, I was Diego's aunt, because Diego and Persephone are the same age and they attended school together. So the Carlsons are pretty well knit together. And Sarah told me a delightful story last night. She said, you see, Sarah got married, told no one, But she did, however, call her parents before she posted on Facebook that she'd been married. I get a telephone call. You didn't tell me. And I said, well, I didn't know. And her response was, I didn't have an Afghan made for them when they got married. So she felt very responsible, but she blamed me for not knowing. So Sarah said that they felt a little guilty, and they went out to LA to visit her brother, and she went for lunch with Marilyn. And because she felt a little guilty about letting everybody know. And so Marilyn's asking her and, talking about, so well, we just decided. We just wanted to do it our own way. And Marilyn's response was, well, he's a damn good-looking dude, and if he was mine, I'd run off and get married without telling anybody too. Marilyn encouraged me lots through my life, and she was my godmother in more ways than one. When I went back to school, and when I was finishing, there was a call, because I went through an internship program, there was a call to the mental health hospital requesting somebody who had completed that internship, would they interview for a job at Gordon Center? And so I responded. I called Marilyn and I said, I have a job interview at Gordon Center. Can I come to your house and stay so I can go to this interview? So 2 kids, and I drove from Iowa to DeKalb, interviewed at Gordon Center, and Marilyn said, by the way, you can take the job because if you know housing, you have a place to stay till you do. And we did. She took my oldest daughter, Michelle, shopping and introduced her to the world of fashion and everything coordinating. Everything had to go together, and we could never leave anything behind. You won't believe how many pairs of pants I moved into assisted living. My daughter, Tara, that time we spent in DeKalb, spent a lot of time mostly using Nelson as a personal taxi service to school because I had to leave, she would be ready, the bus stopped outside her house, she would miss it. And she'd have to call Nelson for a ride. We had many a dinner at Marilyn and Nelson's. We were telling a funny story about trying to move a piece of paneling last night on the top of Nelson's car. It didn't work very well, but we made it. Michelle remembers that she went to the Little Traveler fairly often with Marilyn for lunch, and she promised Marilyn that she would now take her daughter, Juliet, there. I asked Juliet what she wanted to share about Marilyn, but I have to tell this little story first. Marilyn always liked royalty, thought the British royalty was superb. Well, she was born the same year as the Queen. So when I was able to tell her that my son-in-law was a descendant of Queen Victoria, and therefore my youngest granddaughter was a descendant of Queen Victoria, she said, damn, we finally have a princess in the family. Juliet only met my aunt a few times because she lives on the East Coast. I asked her for feedback, and she said, you know, when I was with her, I knew she was a really fun lady, and she was feisty. And I thought that summed up Marilyn to a T. I will tell you that my oldest granddaughter, his husband was stationed at Camp Pendleton. My daughter called me and she said, can I schedule Madison and the baby on your flight from Chicago out to DeKalb so she has somebody to help her with the baby? I said, sure. so Marilyn was arranged to pick us up, and I took one look at the luggage that Madison was loading in the car, and I said, Madison, there's not going to be room. Oh, yeah, she's got that little RAV4. I said, Marilyn, honey, we barely made it into my car, and there'll be one more person. So we get to the airport, and Marilyn drives up and sees this luggage, and her eyes were like this. Well, we'll have to rethink this, she says. So we loaded we figured out what Madison needed immediately and what she didn't necessarily need right away. We loaded the not necessary stuff into the car first. Marilyn drove to Catherine's house. They set off the burglar alarm, tried to get the luggage in. Marilyn called, I think you were out of town, so as they were pulling out, the cops were coming around the corner. And they came back and picked me up and the rest of the luggage. We stayed there. Madison got the news that their house had been assigned. Marilyn drove us all down to Oceanside. And by the way, she probably did it there in seconds, because you won't believe how she drove on the freeway. She could make it, about a quarter faster than I would between her house and Oceanside. And so Madison, we go to the housing assignment place, and Madison gets this address, and we're following directions, and Marilyn's driving. We pull in this driveway, and Marilyn says, I don't know about anybody else, but we've got to be facing the ocean. We get out of the car, and of course we are facing the ocean. We can't see it from the driveway, but we go into the house, walk through the house. The laundry room is big enough for a twin bed and Marilyn's sewing table, and she said, I'm moving in. And if there had been full bathroom facilities on the ground floor, she would have. She made many a trip back and forth, and she hosted my granddaughter's first birthday party in the pool at her condo. My great-granddaughter's. My granddaughter, Michaela, will say that Marilyn was the queen of tour guides. And I know she did this for every one of you in those 2 rows. When you came to LA, you got the tour. Depending on how long, how much. But the last time that Michaela was in town, I was there, and I was with her, and her job was to go drop people off on whatever street they wanted to see, go park somewhere, and tell them she'd be back at such and such a time, or they were supposed to call. We'd go pick them back up again. And at the end of the day, when we're done there, Michaela's boyfriend said, well, I really want to still see Santa Monica Pier. It was now dark. And I went, you know what, that's a little farther away, so why don't we just go back to Torrance and eat? So we went back and went to King's Hawaiian, which was interesting because they'd just come back from Hawaii. My grandsons, Luke and Colton, would tell you that it was really awesome, because when they were there, Marilyn found the perfect place to take my daughter, my youngest granddaughter, and 2 teenage boys, Rodeo Drive, where the women could shop and the guys could look at cars. But personally, for me, my mother never made it to see my last home that I renovated, because that's my hobby. I bought a big old Victorian in very bad shape. I took it down to the studs, restored a tin ceiling, refinished maple floors, stripped 10 coats of paint off of woodwork, and upstairs it was even more. One time, she was back, can't remember, maybe it was something to do with you, because she wouldn't have been traveling at that point, but she rented a car, and she was coming down on Wednesday, because Wednesday was my afternoon off, and about 1 o'clock, she and Cheryl drove up to my house. We went inside. I gave her the downstairs tour because she couldn't make the upstairs. And she said, now we'll go to lunch. And I looked at her and said, no, you're not. You're not going to lunch. Well, you worked all morning. And I said, Marilyn, if you worked all morning and somebody came to lunch at your house, would you say you're taking them out to eat? Heck no. I said, we got chicken salad, and I stopped at the bakery on the way home for French silk pie. So you know, because you know, the one thing Marilyn loved more than cats, Nelson, her children, the theater, and sewing was chocolate. So we sat, and I said, look, we're in this glorious dining room, gold wallpaper, a shiny white tin ceiling with hand-painted gild on it, because that's what I did. I hand-painted all these gilded highlights. I said, you can't find a fancier dining room within 30 miles of Kewanee, Illinois, which is the hog capital of the world. And so we had lunch in my fancy dining. One of the last times I talked to her, I had big news because I sold my house in less than a week, my Victorian. And she said, you know, I was so happy I got to live part of my dream through you because I always wanted to have a Victorian, and you had it, and I got to see it. And I'm so glad that you no longer owned it, and it's not an albatross around your neck. What my aunt taught me was that I could have more than one friend. And I called several of them the day my aunt died. And they all said, oh, is that the Aunt Who? Yes, because I only had two. And is that the Aunt Who? And one of my best friends, who now lives 50 miles from me in Florida, said, oh, you mean I'm not going to be getting in purple shirts or purple sweaters anymore because Aunt Marilyn, for a period of 5 years, decided that I should wear purple. I don't wear purple. So Debbie got purple shirts and purple sweaters after Christmas. But the last day that she was alive, I talked to her on the phone, and I told her a story. Because my granddaughter had sent me a picture. She and her daughter were cooking together. And in the picture, my great-granddaughter Harper is wearing an apron that Marilyn made for me as a little girl. So I told her that story. And as she drifted in and out of consciousness, Catherine said she loved that she smiled. But the only thing that Marilyn did say to me was make sure you come to the party. So I'm so glad that there are lots of people here to come to her party.
My husband, son-in-law Alan Blumenfeld, to represent the sons-in-law. Alan? Or? Then, would you want me just to go on without you?
Yeah, I don't really have much to add other than I was very intimidated by Marilyn when I first met her. The first time we went to her house for Christmas, I ate an entire one of her pecan pies while everyone else was asleep in the house. It's more about me than her, but her pies were excellent. She was a spectacular at sewing, and I never hesitated to ask her to help me when I played Malvolio once, he wears cross-gartered stockings with yellow ribbons. And I had no idea how I was able to get that together. Marilyn said, not a problem. And overnight, she created a pair of stockings that I could put on that had cross-gartered ribbon sewed onto the stockings so I could do the quick change. So she was, as Catherine used to say, she would say, nothing's impossible, but some things live right next door.
Nathan, did you want to say something? Nathan and Jordan, why don't you guys come up together then? Because I know, Jordan, you have something you want to say.
I remember hearing last night my aunt and mom saying, you know, I can't say no to her. You know, I've never, and then I heard it again today, I'd never say no to the church. I literally could never say no to her, and she knew it. And she would call me like all the time. And I remember, and in an amazing way, like not burdened at all. She'd always apologize heavily, at least a few times a week. My phone doesn't work. Nathan, I'm so sorry to bother. And I've been in like pretty high kind of pressure feeling meetings or whatever, and buzzing, there she is, and I'm like, all right, I got to take this, and I'm walking. I always had to, and I think she knew it, and I was really honored to like be the guy that she called, you know? It's like my phone's off, like my phone doesn't work, and she's 92, and I'm trying to walk her through like a complicated technological software problem, which is impossible. And then during COVID, it happened over and over and over and over again, and we weren't allowed to go there to the place that she was living. And I told her, I'm like, I'm gonna come there, and I want your person to come out, because it was so important to her. And she also was very kind of rebellious in a way, where she was just like, I don't care. Like, you can come. She'd get wheeled out. But towards the last 10 years, I just was very grateful and honored just to be able to be with her, you know, and drive her places and help her in and out of her wheelchair and carry her. And that Christmas where she broke out of the hospital and I'm holding her, you know, to get her into the party. And I was just, you know, it really is just an honor just to have had the opportunity to do that with her. I actually think of her a lot when things get weird and there's like crises in my life or whatever, it feels like a crisis. She was very like, it is what it is. Like, we're gonna fight, we're gonna just move through this. And even if she was witty or sarcastic or pessimistic or whatever she did, the energy that she had was, we're gonna survive it. So like, buck up and walk through it, and you know, it's hot, oh well. Like, I'm gonna sit in this wheelchair for 2 hours because the thing's not working out, and I would sit with her and it was like a nightmare, and she would be able to handle it, no problem. And so I actually call upon that kind of strength and maybe stubbornness, and think about that a lot. And I'm just honored to be here and to have been a part of her life in any capacity that I was. So.
Couple things that I thought of when you guys were speaking. One, I remember when I saw The Hunger Games with my wife, I had never read it. And halfway through the movie, I turned to my wife, I'm like, I'm gonna have to watch these kids kill each other now? And she's like, yeah. I was like, I don't wanna do that. 2 weeks later, I'm at Carrie's house, and I hear, yeah, Grandma took Chloe to see The Hunger Games. I'm like, Grandma, did you read The Hunger Games? She's like, no. I was like, did you like the movie? She goes, oh God, it was awful. So she legit took you because she loves you. And then Carrie, talking about her always knowing someone, knowing everyone. When I was 16, 17, my dad did a performance of The Rhinoceros. John Parsalter's The Rhinoceros. And I was there with my high school girlfriend. And the most memorable part of that performance, in my mind, should have been in the second half when he transformed into a rhinoceros. As I'm sitting next to my then high school girlfriend, he got naked, poured soil on the floor and planted and rolled around the mud, ran off. That should have been the most memorable part. The most memorable part of that performance for me was sitting at halftime, intermission, and Cindy Crawford walks by and looks at my mother and goes, hello, Marilyn. Marilyn looked at Cindy Crawford and goes, hello, Cindy, how's your mother? Grandma, maybe you want to introduce me to Cindy Crawford? Anyway, the thing I always think of when I think of my grandmother, I'm very like both sides of my family, education is very important. And I get from my mother blessing, curse of sort of striving for perfection, always trying to get an A, always trying to be the best. And my mom would tell me that her mother, my grandmother, would say something to the effect of, Kathy, why are you studying? The teacher's either good and taught it to you, or the teacher's bad and nobody will know. So either way, you're going to get what you're going to get on the test. So just go and have fun. And so she would always remind me as I was in school to go have fun. And my friends in college and law school will tell you that I had a lot of fun. Didn't just study. Because she gave me sort of that reminder to sit and remember that. And the second is, as we're coming out here, there's a lot of stories, but the big one is we're coming out here, my wife, who's never been to Cal, said, you know, what restaurants do you think of? What food do you want to eat? We're going to DeKalb. You've told all these stories. And I said, you know, to be honest, I don't think of restaurants. I think of her pies. I think of her desserts. And when she was moving from her condo to the assisted living and downsizing, she knew that Eleni and I like to cook. She said, here, you could have all my recipes, have all my cookbooks, have all my notes, take whatever you want. And I was like, rad, I'm finally going to get this pecan pie recipe because no one makes pecan pie like her. And I got the recipe, and I made it with my mother-in-law, and it just wasn't the same. There was just something, you know, not on the page. And so that's to me, emblematic of the loss. You know, she may have left behind the recipe, but it'll just still never quite turn out the same. So, love to all of you guys for being here, and that's all.
Okay. Our brother, her son Jim James. Jim?
First of all, I want to thank everybody for being here. I'm sure she meant as much to you as you did to her, and our family really appreciates you all being here today. One thing I do want to remember is, and I was talking to Kathy out at the cemetery, and she was speaking about adopting a child. And my brother and I, Mark, were adopted by Mom and Dad. And they brought us into their family, and we got to meet our sister, Kathy. And I'm not going to tell you how Kathy and my brother Mark got along. You want to talk about somebody that would pick on a girl terribly, he did. So we got involved with the family, and it felt like home to us. They were great to us. They treated us like their own. And then all of a sudden, my youngest sister, Carrie, came into the picture. And my brother was not going to have any part of that. So I spent more time protecting my youngest sister, Carrie, against my brother, Mark. And one thing I used to remember about Mom, when I was in high school, she was always glad to see me home. She'd go, "Thank God you are home. Here's Carrie." So every night after school, I would walk around in the backyard with this little girl on my shoulders and give my mom a rest. And there were a few times I would walk in and, you know, I get a little tired carrying her around the backyard all the time so Mom could rest. And a few times I come in, there she is, passed out in the living room chair. But you know, I didn't mind doing that because she was one of the most amazing women that I had the honor and the pleasure of spending my life with. One thing I gotta let all of you know, that the day that she passed, my sister Kathy and I were on the phone, and I said, "Can I speak to Mom?" And Kathy said, "Mom, Jim is on the phone." And all of a sudden, Kathy got on the phone real excited, and she says, "You know," she perked up when she heard it was you. So, you know, as being a favorite son, I told Mom, I said, you know what, Mom? I said, guess what? Now you're going to start a new chapter in your life because you're going to be with Dad. And she says, absolutely. I've seen Dad a lot the last few days. And then again, I thought, being the favorite son, I'd say, Mom, you were the best mom in the world. And she laughed and she said, Jim, I was your only mother in the world. I go, well, you got me there on that one. So I had to let that lie. You know, I do want, and you know, families grow, they go on their own. You know, they have families of their own, they raise children. And that's what happened. My brother and I moved Mom and Dad out to California. And we rented a big Penske box truck. And my brother and I helped Dad load the truck up, and we pulled their car, and we drove straight through to Torrance, California from DeKalb. I think we made it in what, 72 hours? And I'll tell you what, I got on that LA freeway, I went, holy, never mind. But you know, I noticed one thing when we got there and we got to their condo. Mark lasted about 24 hours because Mom and Dad were arguing on what furniture went where. This has got to go there, this has got to go there. And Mark says, I'm headed back to Minnesota. He had to get back to teach anyways. So I stuck around there for a week. And I'll bet I changed that furniture a dozen times before they were finally happy with what they had. But I didn't have to travel out there because I talk to my mom every month on the phone, religiously. I call her every month. And I got to know what Harry and Chloe were doing on Carrie's family. I got to know what Nathan and Jordan were doing. So I didn't have to travel. I got a bird's eye view of everything that was going on with the whole family. You know, and then of course she'd get on Facebook and with my side of the family, and, oh, Amy's doing this, oh, Jonathan's doing this, Jessica. She had more family knowledge, I'll bet, of any mother in the United States. But I'm going to miss the conversations with her because it was a lot of fun. And, you know, I feel special. And I feel privileged to be adopted by these two parents. And all I can say is that she's happy now and she's at peace because she's with Dad and they're having a ball. In ending, I do want to send an apology to everybody. My wife, Angela, who my mom said was the greatest thing that ever happened to me, couldn't make it because our son was down at Fort Leonard Wood in the Army, and he may be going back overseas because of the issues that are going here. So she asked if she could stay down there with her son, our son. And I said, absolutely. And she says, well, I hope Kathy isn't upset. And I said, Kathy would want you to do that, and so would Mom. So I apologize for that. I want to thank everybody for coming. And your lives meant a lot to my mom, just as her lives meant a lot to you. Thank you very much.
From the first moment we laid eyes on one another, it was love at first sight. How we worshiped one another from my first breath to her last. We trusted one another and counted on one another completely. For almost 70 years, we held each other in that sway, and almost no matter what. Her almost dying when we lost Laura Ellen one sad, dark day in 1955. She was turning 29, and I was turning 3, and Mama's subsequent coma and hospitalization for 6 weeks was an episode that marked us both forever and always tried to threaten that trust. I was forever terrified she was leaving. She was forever terrified of leaving me behind. Until one day, not too long ago, neither of us was afraid anymore. No one made me laugh harder. No one made me cry harder. No one taught me more. No one was prouder of me. No one frustrated me more. And no one trusted me more. my biggest fan in the theater. It will be hard to be on stage and know she will never be in the audience again. At long last, no one will ask me every single time I leave town, headed for a northern or eastern or both destination in the wintertime, do you have a warm enough coat? I finally stopped saying, Mama, I'm blank years old, I have a warm enough coat, when I turned 60 and figured the only thing that got that relieved look on her face was, I love you. Yes, I have a warm enough coat. When she finally understood who I was in the world after reading my book, she became an admirer of what had kept me away from hearth and home for a totally unacceptable amount of time, so much so that she almost approved of that absence. She adored my husband, my children, their wives, and their children, and could never understand how, without my constant physical presence, everything and everyone turned out okay in the end. She would never have dreamt of a life of raising children that didn't involve being there 24/7 until they were grown and gone. Over the years, we talked about one another's errors and omissions. Over the decades, she simply referred to the only unforgivable time of my life, my Declaration of Independence, as that time you were crazy and thank God you were sane. She came to recognize that when Laura Ellen died, that I hadn't been unconscious. She thought we were both unconscious together, she told me. So deep was our symbiosis. There are a great many people in this room who, when they were babies, wore the little sweaters and booties she knit especially for them. Many a bride and groom have one of her special hand-knit or crocheted afghans. She loved it when she passed things on that she had made down to other generations. Jordan's to Persephone and Athena, Nathan's to Wolf. There was only one time she made a big E on the scoreboard with that one. When Chloe was born, she said to me, "Look at what I brought, the first thing I ever made for Carrie." She held up a baby bunting, faded white. It was 2 layers thick. I recognized it immediately. I reminded her that when I was 9 and she was pregnant with Carolyn, she was convinced she was going to die giving birth to the baby, who turned out to be Carolyn, and that baby was going to die with her. That surviving Laura Ellen's birth was a fluke, and this time she wasn't going to fight them when they came for her and the baby. The they in the story were her grandmother and my father's grandmother, both dead at the time of Laura Ellen's birth and death, who were sitting on the end of her bed in the hospital, all dressed up for church, of course, and they kept turning around and looking at me and saying, "Come on, Marilyn, it's time to come with us." And I said, "No, I have to stay with Kathy." And when I woke up, I did. I reminded her that she had given me a whole list of instructions on what was to happen to our family after her death, including making sure that the dead baby was buried in her arms, wearing that godforsaken double-knit bunting. But Carrie doesn't remember. Nobody remembers except you, and it is the first thing I made for her. I suggested that I would want it to be burned or buried in my backyard before I ever let it touch Chloe Nell's precious body with all its associations with death. Mama looked at me quizzically. "I guess I could give you a lot of responsibility then. But who else could I have trusted with that list? Your father? Besides, it all turned out all right." She finally forgave me for throwing it in the trash when she wasn't looking, but not until after an episode of All My Children revealed to her a character going through what I went through, and suddenly and cathartically it was revealed to her that of course I had been telling the truth of my experience all along. I learned about marriage by watching her relationship with my father grow and evolve and change over all but the first 2 years of theirs. I watched their joys and sorrows, challenges and triumphs, impossible differences and ultimate shared history, and a deep well of love conquering all. He worshiped and adored her in a way that most people save for saints. I completely understood the feeling was beyond mutual when she met Jordan when he was 3 days old. Her face burst into 1,000 points of light as she looked at that baby in her arms and cooed, "I can't wait for your grandfather to meet you." When the Parkinson's destroyed his mind and he became horribly mean to her, she stood by him, literally like a rock, never wavered in her insistence on trying to make him understand again who she really was. She was with him in the nursing home 7 hours a day, 7 days a week. I would say, "Mama, the nursing home caregiver police are coming to have you arrested for working over 40 hours a week." She would say, "You do it your way when your time comes. This is how I'm doing it." She always did it her way, with a stubbornness that I finally understood was her way of surviving, saying, "Yes, I'm here to life, no matter what cards it deals to us." An avid traveler, she would say, "Don't wait until you can't walk like me. One of my biggest regrets in life was having to stand at the bottom of the pyramid, and I couldn't go in because I didn't get that knee done in time." She hated her hearing aids and ultimately never wore one of them. "I don't really need two," she declared. We all learned it was better to text than to call if we wanted her to actually hear important information. During COVID, when we asked her if we should move her out of her room since everyone around her was literally dying, she said, "No, I feel safest in this room with my jigsaw puzzles. I'm not going to die of this thing. Can you send me another one with the dogs and cats?" She was a big worrier, always a whirl of nonstop activity her whole life. I think maybe it was to overcome that constant fears and worries that haunted her since childhood. When she became wheelchair-bound, the constant whirl was over. She shared the questions that kept her up at night and tormented her when she was alone. "When I was little, my father was sick and everyone was so scared. Why did my mother only make sure I was dry and fed and clothed, but no hugs or kisses? My mother never came to school, never, ever. My sister Phyllis walked me to kindergarten that first day. She never belonged to the PTA. She never showed up for an assembly. Why? Why not? She was so active at St. Mark's Lutheran. Why didn't she come to school when it would have meant the world for us to have her there? Why would my mother and your father's mother say all that horrible stuff in front of you when I was in the hospital when Laura Ellen died? Why would they ask your father in front of you what he was going to do with you when I died? How could they have been so hurtful and so thoughtless?" I would forgive these women, who were so much younger than either my mother or I were at the time we were discussing their errors and omissions to us in life. I would try to explain why, but she, forever 26 years older than I was, wouldn't budge. When 3 months ago today, they told us she was no longer able to live where she was living because she was a screaming 3-person transfer, I promised her, "Mama, we've gotten through everything else together and we'll get through this too." She said, I know. Daddy told you to take care of me and I know I can count on you." Goodbye, always beautiful, totally exasperating, forever amazing Mama. Thank you for living long enough for me to say, thank God you aren't here. Thank you. When she gave me the assignment of making her show better than Daddy's, I wondered how I could ever go through all those photos again and make her life in pictures. And because I reached out to our wonderful family, I didn't have to. Thank you, Daddy. In the Jewish tradition, mourners recite Yitzchak, a memorial for the one who has died. My mother had great respect for the Sholem Community Organization, the secular humanistic Jewish community in which Alan and I raised her grandsons to be good men and social activists. Herschel Hartman, our Wegweiser, has written a secular Yitzchak. I cannot imagine sending Mama off without it. Please stand as you are able and say it with me. In the rising of the sun and in its going down, we remember her. In the blowing of the wind and in the chill of winter, we remember her. In the opening of buds and in the rebirth of spring, we remember her. In the blueness of the sky and in the warmth of summer, we remember her. In the rustling of leaves and in the beauty of autumn, we remember her. In the beginning of the year and when it ends, we will remember her. When we are weary and in need of strength, we will remember her. When we are lost and sick at heart, we will remember her. When we have joys we yearn to share, we will remember her. In our remembering is life eternal. Kathy?
Please be seated. Please be seated. This is Emily's speech from our town. Goodbye. Goodbye, world. Goodbye, Grover's Corners, Mama and Papa. Goodbye to clocks ticking and Mama's sunflowers, and food and coffee, and new ironed dresses and hot baths, and sleeping and waking up. O Earth, you are too wonderful for anybody to realize you. Do any human beings ever realize life while they live it? Every minute. And I'm going to invite you to rise again, please. Into your hands, O merciful Savior, we commend your spirit, Marilyn, a child of your own making, made in your own image. Acknowledge her, we pray, a sheep of your own fold, a lamb of your own flock, and a daughter of your own redeeming. We know you have received her into the arms of your mercy and into the blessed rest of everlasting peace, and into the company of the saints in light. Amen. You may be seated. And as we prepare to leave this place of worship, may God bless you and keep you. May God's face shine upon you and be gracious to you. May God look upon you with kindness and give you peace. Let us go forth knowing that we have been in the presence of a saint, and maybe we didn't know it at the time. Amen.
So Denny is going to play us out. And I am saying, let's sing Music Alone Shall Live all the way to the Elwood House, where Gavin is waiting for us, because that was him on the phone going, "Where are you?"